My dear friends, now we resume day number 29 on page 150 of the Treasure for Life edition of the Orchos Tzaddikim, the Ways of the Righteous. Arba madregos yesh Bushah. There are 4 stages in Bushah. Ha'achas, hamispayish lasos aver begoli, ve'osa aver b'seser, is one who is embarrassed about doing a sin in public, but will do it privately. Hareze kegonev das elyon. It's like you're trying to steal from heaven. Shemizbayish lifnei ha'olam v'lo lifnei Hashem baruch hu. You're embarrassed in front of your neighbors. You're embarrassed in front of your friends. So you're not going to do something terrible in front of them. But in front of God, you have no problem at all. Also rabba me'od. And that's a really, really terrible place to be in. What's the next level? Hashniyosh hamizbayish lifnei ha'olam v'gam b'seiser yimona min ha'averos ki yorei shema yivod lifnei adam v'yizbayish lifneihem. So he won't do sins. The next level is he won't do sins in public, but also privately he won't do sins, but only because he's afraid people will find out. Oh, there are cameras everywhere. I don't want anyone to find out. And on this, our sages said, it's better to do this than to do otherwise. Why? Because at least a person is not doing it for the right intention. He will come to do it in the right intention. What's the third level? If a person thinks, asher esbayish lefnei ha'eved yoser milefnei ha'adon ve'egnov das elyon. He says, what's going to be? If a piece of stage, the next stage is, how can I do this evil in private, being more ashamed before the servant than before the master, and stealing the mind of the Almighty? And in this way, he is deterred from transgression, and this is a worthy quality. That means a person thinks, what's the difference between there's a Ganav. In the Talmud, there's 2 different types of robbers. There's a Ganav and there's a Gazlan. Okay? What's the difference between the 2? One steals at night. One steals by day or by night. He doesn't care. Why does one steal by night? Because he's afraid people are going to see him. But the one who steals by day or by night doesn't care about anybody. He doesn't care if you see him. He doesn't care if God sees him. The guy who steals by night is worse. Why? He's afraid of people. He's not afraid of God. He has no fear of God. We need to be careful that if, God forbid, we were to sin out, to all of you listening and all of you watching here and all of you in the Torch Center here, you have nothing to worry about. You all are holy, righteous people, never sinned a day in your lives. So you have nothing to worry about. But others like myself need to be concerned. Why do we need to be concerned? Because sometimes we can do things not for the right reason, and we can be concerned that perhaps, I'm not going to sin because someone's going to see, or I'm not going to sin. That's like the thief who steals at night because he's afraid that someone's going to see, but it's not afraid that God is going to see. What's the 4th level? Im yizbayesh ha'adam begoli u'ba'asaser lifnei Hashem baruch hu bilvad. Kemo she'adam yizbayesh lifnei chavero, kach hu yizbayesh lifnei Hashem ein lamala mizos. He says the 4th level, the highest level, is one who is always afraid of God. Day, night, it doesn't make a difference. I'm in front of Hashem at all times, and therefore I can't sin. I can't say. I'll give you an example. There are certain people. I had a friend of mine. We were talking about, in one of the classes, we were talking about the trait of dignity, of kavod, of honor. And we were talking about how a person is defined by how they talk, how they speak. When someone speaks in a refined manner, right, they come across as being a refined person. When someone speaks a crass and vulgar way, what happens? That's the way that people look at them, is as if they're crass and vulgar. So this guy asked me, he says, "Do I?" And I was talking about how people carry themselves, how they dress. If they dress in a suit and tie, there's always a certain respect that people give because of the way they're dressed, the way they carry themselves in a dignified fashion. Okay. So this individual asked me, so do you think that I am carrying myself around with dignity? As a friend, he asked me. So I said, I think actually you walk around with great dignity. You're always dressed well. You drive your car, it's clean. It's not all muddy and not all dirty. You carry yourself nicely. Till you open your mouth. His mouth was like a toilet bowl and said foul language, and he's changed a lot over the years that I know him. But it was, they would think that you're dignified till you open your mouth. And I think many times people don't realize that the words they choose can depreciate their value, not only in the eyes of others, but also in their own eyes. If someone values themselves, they won't use certain words. Amru Chacham, our sage said, Kol ha'osed dvar averu misbayesh bo, mochen lo al kol avonosav. If someone does a sin and he's embarrassed by it, he's forgiven of all his sins. Unbelievable. Ve'od amru boshes ponim legan eden. Someone who is shamefaced goes right on to the Garden of Eden. Ve'amru chachamim, and our sages tell us, Habusha ve'emuna mechuber zu lezu, that shame and faith and knowledge of Hashem are very closely linked. Ki habayshon machzik be'emuna im kol adam. Because someone who is carrying himself with the proper dignity and shame is able to find Hashem and is with people. And someone who doesn't believe properly in Hashem doesn't have the proper dignity and shame. Amar Chacham, sages tell us, the wise man once said, he says, when you have no shame, you will do whatever you desire. A person should never do something, anything, which his friend would be ashamed to object to. Kigon, Adam sheyesh lo devar seser, such as intruding upon a person's privacy. And your friend walks in and, I guess, intrudes on your privacy, when the latter would be ashamed to ask him to leave, or lodging in his friend's house when the latter is disturbed by it and is ashamed to ask him to leave, or reading his friend's letters, right? Or she is achsen bebeis chaver v'hum mitztayer b'zeh u'mizbayesh lomer lo latzes. O sheyikra ksavim shechavero v'chavero mizbayesh lomer lo shelo yikra. Someone reads your letters. By the way, this is a halacha that you're not allowed to open up your neighbor's letters. Not only because it's breaking a law, all right, it's some crime. They'll bring you in New York City and they'll ring up some 34 convictions, right, for opening up someone's letter. But the halacha actually says that. The halacha says you're not allowed to look in someone's private notebook, someone's diary. You're not allowed to look in someone's private emails, someone's private text messages. It's private, and it's taking away someone's shame. It's private. It's personal. V'chol kayotze b'zeh. And things like this. Yidaktek me'od badavar. A person should be very, very careful about this. Shelo yachbid atzmo b'shum davar, v'shelo yishal davar mimenu shum matano v'o lishol kelev o ma'osav. So a person should be very careful not to be a burden on others. Don't ask them something. Don't ask them for a gift. Don't ask them if you can borrow their money or their tools when you know your friend doesn't want to allow you to, and he doesn't have the strength to tell you not to. You know he's not doing it willingly, but he's not going to have a choice. You know that he can't say no, so you're asking. But someone who has proper shame, it disturbs him. It's difficult for him that his friend is feeling a shame as a result of him. And therefore the wise man said, Al tohav mibnei adam Ela mi shemara atzmo she'eno yochel lamod bilti ezrascha. Love only the man who gives the impression that he cannot get along without you, though you need him more than he needs you, and who, if you offend him, will give you and make it seem as if he was the offender, and who will ask of you things that he does not need, so that you will be ashamed to ask him. You will not be ashamed to ask him. So he'll ask you for a favor just so that you can feel comfortable asking him. I want to share with you, if you want to know a story that will exemplify this in the greatest way. My father had the privilege of having a study partnership with one of the leading rabbis in Monsey, New York. When we grew up in Monsey, there was a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Schwab. And Rabbi Schwab was such a special man. I remember my mother passing by school certain days, and she would be glowing. I'm like, what happened? She would stop by at school. Like, what, Mommy, what happened? Like, what are you so excited? She says, I saw Rabbi Schwab today. I saw Rabbi Schwab her whole day. She was like glowing. She saw the righteous scholar, the righteous, pious, man. It was like my mother's whole face would be beaming just because she saw Rabbi Schwab. So my father had the privilege of learning together with Rabbi Schwab. I think, if I recall correctly, it was like 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. My father would meet with him in one of the synagogues, and they would learn together for about a half hour, an hour, and they would talk a little bit, and he got to know my father. One week, my father totally forgot about their study. Totally forgot. He's so embarrassed. About a half hour later, my father realized it, and he's like, oh my goodness, what do I do? What do I do? I cannot believe it. I cannot believe the rabbi's sitting and waiting for me, and I totally forgot. Few short minutes later, the phone rings, and it was Rabbi Schwab on the phone. And Rabbi Schwab, with his unbelievable modesty, unbelievable dignity, he says to my father, please, please, please forgive me. I totally forgot to come. I totally forgot about our learning today. Please forgive me. I guarantee you he did not forget. But he knew that my father forgot. And he didn't want him to be embarrassed. So he called as if he was the one who forgot. That is true modesty. He could have called up and said, excuse me, don't you know my time is very valuable? Apparently you don't. There are many ways that you can slice this, right? Many ways that people can make you feel humiliated. But that's not what great Torah masters do. He called my father first and apologized profusely for forgetting what he did not forget. He just didn't want my father to be embarrassed. That is greatness. That's what the Torah teaches us. So, someone who wants to attain this great trait, he should be in a habit of always sitting before one in whose presence he is ashamed. Someone who's far greater than you in wisdom. Someone who's far greater than you in knowledge, in talent. It's humbling. Ve'al yechalel hadar ponav lishol mibnei adam ki kevon shetechalel hadar ponecha I ata motze misha mechadshehu lecha perush sheyachzor v'yichadesho sochil shechilalta atzmecha. And one should not lose his dignity by constantly asking things of others. For once you lose your dignity, you will find no one to restore it to you. Meaning to restore and renew what you have lost by your own doing. It means once someone is self-deprecating, someone loses their own dignity, it becomes very, very difficult to restore it. My dear friends, this concludes day number 29.